as we're in the process of announcing a very exciting and extensive list of programs to begin just after Labor Day. I can tell you tonight that our season opener will be one of our great debates series sponsored by the Stan and Arlene Ginsberg Family Foundation. We will be holding this program once again at the historic Congress Hall, a place where our Bill of Rights was passed by the early Congress of the United States. The program is in cooperation with the National Park Service, and we will be holding it on the important date of September 11th. In observance of American values on that significant date, this program will feature a lively and a very timely debate on the future of the U.S. Supreme Court and the idea of how the Supreme Court should interpret the Constitution of the United States. We have two brilliant and really effective speakers who are young law professors who hold very different points of view around the legal doctrine called originalism, and they will go at it for your education and benefit. This is a members-only event. So I know we have a lot of non-members here tonight, so please take advantage of one of our membership offers and join the council. Turning back to tonight, I want to thank our sponsor for this evening, Wilmington Trust, for their support, and welcome to the podium Wilmington's Senior Vice President and Chief Fiduciary Officer of the Wealth Management Division, Donald DiCarlo Jr. Don is also a member of the board of the World Affairs Council, and he will introduce our guest to you. Following Ms. Burke's presentation, she and I will have a conversation, and then before we close, of course, we'll turn to questions from you. So off we go. Don.
Great pleasure on behalf of my colleagues at Wilmington Trust and M&T Bank. It's a pleasure for Wilmington Trust to sponsor this event and to be part of the mission of the World Affairs Council of Philadelphia to further the Council's motto, democracy demands discourse. And our guest this evening, Tarana Burke, has certainly stirred up discourse. In fact, there's only one political and cultural issue that's really held the attention of the country and much of the world beyond, of course, the daily developments in Washington. And that issue is Me Too. And tonight we're pleased to be able to learn the story behind Me Too directly from its founder. Ms. Burke is the Senior Director of Programs at the Brooklyn-based Girls for Gender Equity and has dedicated more than 25 years of her life to issues of social justice and laying the groundwork, really, for the Me Too movement, which initially was created to help women of color who have survived sexual abuse and assault. So please join me. It's my great honor in welcoming Tarana Burke.
I'm so surprised to see so many people here. I am, when I walked in the door, I was like, oh, maybe I should have worn something different. A couple of days in Martha's Vineyard, I'm still having my linen wardrobe. But I am glad to see everybody here, and I'm glad to be back in Philadelphia. Do people know that I lived here for like almost 10 years? Yeah. I didn't know, because I get people thinking I'm from all over the place, and when I'm other places, they think I'm from somewhere else. So yeah, I'm not from here, but I definitely lived in Philadelphia for a minute. And I still have it in my heart. I'm not going to take a bunch of time here because I'm anxious to get into the conversation, but, you know, I've done a lot of talking in the last almost year since Me Too went viral, and I did a lot of talking before that about this issue, just people didn't want to hear me then, about this issue. One of the things that I have, that I put as sort of a mandate right now in the work that we're doing in the Me Too movement is narrative change. And when I talk about narrative change, it's because the dominant narrative in the mainstream media about what this movement is, forget about how it started. We'll talk about that a little bit. But more important in this moment than how it started is where we are. And the dominant narrative about where we are is really damaging. There is a dominant narrative in the mainstream media that this is a movement about naming and shaming. And this is a movement about targeting men, and this is a movement that is or anti-men. And there's all these kind of really dangerous notions that exist. And one, make it hard for us to do our work, but two, make it hard for us to continue to have this national dialogue that is very, very important. And so one of the things I hope to accomplish tonight is to have you all leave here with a clear understanding of not just how the movement started, but more importantly, where we're going. And I say this all the time, but it is not enough to just talk about awareness without a moral imperative, to have something that goes with that is a directive for action. This is not an awareness campaign. In October of 2017, millions and millions and millions of people across the world literally raised their hands to say Me Too, and in effect, those people's hands are still raised. Because immediately it shifted from those everyday people who had their hand raised to these stories of who's going to be next and who Me Too was targeting. And really, it's just everyday people like the people in this audience who are saying, this happened to me too. And then the questions they have after that is, what now? Can you help me? Can I help myself? Can I change my community? What do we do now? And we are a small group of people, and even though this is a big issue with a big name, there's a small group of people driving this, and we can't do it alone. We can't do it unless people like you all, like I was just a regular person, an everyday person who made up my mind, essentially, that I didn't want to see other children, particularly children who look like me, dealing with the things that I had dealt with. And I was an organizer. And the principles that I was raised with as an organizer said that when there is a community problem, then you find a community solution. This is just one solution. The work that we do is just one solution. But if we keep talking about the wrong things, and if we keep allowing the narrative to be dictated by the media, then those of you who have brilliant ideas about what to do in your community will be overshadowed. And it'll take another 10 or 15 years and another viral moment before somebody pays attention to you. And we don't want that to happen. Me Too is just one idea. I'm so convinced because I've seen so much brilliance come out of our communities that there are other ideas out there. And at this moment, it's more important for me to shine a light on people who have other ideas than it is for me to run down these stories. So I want to have a conversation about how we got started. I want to have a conversation about why this is so important and how, and really talk a little bit about the breadth and depth of this issue. You will see a lot of people in this moment will celebrate me, right? They're like, oh girl, I see you living your best life. I saw you on the cover of this magazine and I saw you on this red carpet. That's not relevant. It's really not relevant. All of those things can be taken away, and they will. Trust me. We've seen it happen, right? It will. People get popular and they get famous and then they get unfamous or unpopular. It doesn't matter. Because regardless of I'm on the cover of a magazine or on a red carpet, sexual violence will still be as pervasive as it is. Nothing about me walking down that red carpet or taking a picture is going to change what's happening every day across the world, in our communities, at every second. That's not going to change that. What's going to change that is us changing our conversation and us making up our minds that we can do the thing that we need to do to stop sexual violence. That we are the ones that we've been waiting for. There's no one solution. There's no one bullet. There's no one thing, no one person, no one savior. It's going to take collective work and collective action because we have collective responsibility. So that's what I'm here to talk about. I hope we have a really lively conversation. And I hope that you leave here, if nothing else, changed and ready and understanding that we all have a role to play. I'm going to do my part, whether people pay attention to me or not. I'm just here to try to convince you to know that you have a part and to do something with that. So, thank you.
I'm glad that you want to have a lively conversation. I'm glad that you want to talk about the different narratives, because I think all those things are important. In preparing Too that they did on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
You might have seen it. It was a number of months back, but it's a group of friends at a social dinner, and somebody brings up Me Too. One by one, everybody at the table goes, "Be careful, be careful, be careful." And it was funny, but it was all humor works when it's true, right? So it was funny because there are a lot of people who feel like this is a landmine, a minefield to walk through when you talk about this issue and the things that come from the issue, and that it's really you have to be careful. I'll try to be careful, but I also want us to to really talk about it and not be afraid to talk about it. So first of all, let's go back, and if you can tell the story of how you came to create Me Too about 11 years ago now, 12 years ago now. I think that's important for the audience to understand. So.
Sure. So I am an organizer, which I like to preface with because I think it helps people understand who I am in the world. I started organizing at 14 as a part of a youth collective, leadership collective, and I never stopped because I figured out early, and I'm grateful that I figured out early that my voice mattered, and I didn't have to wait to become powerful. Some adult told me your voice matters now. Also, it's hard to shut me up, so I can just keep talking about these things. And so, one, I'm a survivor of sexual violence, and multiple times. And so, as a child, as a young person, I carried these things as deep, dark secrets. I carried them. I carried the ownership of them and the shame. And so, as I got older, actually when I got pregnant with my daughter, which was about 23, I started, it became very important to me to try to figure out how not to pass these feelings that I had on to my child. And I believe, there's a lot of like old wives' tales about the energy passing through and all that kind of stuff. I still believe that. And so, I tell the story, you may have heard me tell this different, I tell the story a little bit differently now because as I had told it in the past, I was just telling sort of the details, the facts, on this date, this happened on this date. But the more I think about it, the more I talk about it, the seed was planted for this for a long, long time. Because I always had a question about why we didn't talk about this issue. Why was it a secret, right? And I always had so I'm gonna tell you all this story. I'm trying to tell it short. But when I was young, again, like I said, I was a survivor, and I did not know any other survivors. I'd never met anybody or heard of anybody who had any experience like what I had. And so for me as a 6-year-old, I thought, and then a 9-year-old, 12-year-old, I thought that I was alone. I thought this had only happened to me, and it just only happened to girls like me. And I thought I was fast, and I had all these notions that I had developed because little kids don't know, right? And when I was about 11 or 12, maybe 12 or 13, I read I Know Why the Cage Bird Sings. My Angela's book. I'm sure everybody here knows. And in the book, she talks about being molested. And I remember reading it and thinking, there's 2 of us. And I was just like, I really thought, oh my gosh, this happened, so in my mind, I had this really special bond with her. Because I thought, and if you know her in part of her story, she didn't talk for 7 years. That didn't work for me. Maybe I should try to, no, it didn't work. But, so I had this special bond with her. And then in high school, my freshman year in high school, I was in an honest English class. And so I had read all her stuff. I was like, I loved my Angela. And then I had an honest English class, and my teacher played a recording of her reciting Phenomenal Woman. And I remember, and I thought I was so smart. I came into the class and they were like, oh, we're gonna study Maya Angelou. And I was like, I know all about Maya Angelou. I was so arrogant about it. And then I remember being put on my behind when I heard that recording, and I thought, oh my God, I believe her. Right? I had this really interesting moment of she sounds like she really believes that she's a phenomenal woman. Because up until that point, I thought, oh, this is good. She has like a roadmap for faking it, right? She sounds smart. She's smart. And I thought, this is the roadmap. I'm going to be smart. I'm going to be accomplished. I'm going to be perfect in all the ways that will keep people from seeing the reality of who I am. And so that moment threw me for a loop. And so just to shorten the story, what ended up happening though was, I remember writing, I still have this, I wrote in my little journal, I used to keep a journal. When I went home, I was so perplexed, like, and remember when you were in English class and you learned how you write your thesis statement, and so I wrote kind of like a statement at the top of the paper that said, question, how can a body that holds this kind of pain also hold joy? I was 15 when I wrote that. And that has been a guiding principle and a leading question in my life since that moment. And really, for me, when I think about it, and I really had to put some thought to it, that's the seed for this movement. Because as I got older and I started doing work with young people and doing youth leadership work, and I would encounter child after child, mostly little black girls, who had the same experiences that I had, and had that same light that had been dimmed in their eyes that I had. And what I had started discovering for myself was figuring out, and because of being pregnant with my daughter, figuring out how to curate joy in my life was changing me. Figuring out how to move from the trauma, knowing that the trauma is not going anywhere, but figuring out how not to identify with the trauma, but identify with the joy. The joy, I deserve joy. That I could have it, that I could create it, that I already have it. I create it on a regular basis. Figuring those things out was saving my life. And so when I started this work, it literally was taking those life lessons and speaking that truth and that healing into the lives of these girls. That started after I was unable to tell a young girl, me too. Before I got my daughter, before I was about 21 or 22 years old, I was working at a camp and I had a child disclose to me. And it was somebody who I had just met, but I really connected to her, probably because she was a survivor. And when she disclosed to me, I was so taken back by the story and so kind of in my own, trying to figure out my own stuff that I could not tell her my story. And I just wanted to say me too, and I literally couldn't vocalize. And between the disappointment in her eyes and the potential I knew I had with both my child and the children I was working with, I figured I had to do something. This was not the goal. The goal really was to do something in my community, because I looked around this community that I was in and nobody spoke healing into this community for anything. For the police violence, for the political violence, for the sexual violence, nobody spoke healing and life into the community. We spoke strategy, and we talked about how we can put Band-Aids on this, and we talked about dealing with people's immediate needs, and as an organizer, you hear that all the time. One of the first principles of organizing is to meet people's needs, and take people from where they are. And when you hear about immediate needs, it's always food, clothes, and water, right? Food, clothes, and shelter. Sorry. But nobody talks about your emotional needs. And so that's where this started, and it grew from there because the issue was so big. It really just, and I'm talking about before it went viral. The reason why we grew over years is we started with young people, we started with young black girls, and then it went to to black women, and then it just went to women, and then it was men, and then it were practitioners who were like, wait, how are you reaching this community? Help us. Because the issue is so pervasive, there was always a need. And that's probably the longest answer to a question ever, but.
Okay, so jump to, you see Alyssa Milano say me too. When you see that, do you react like, wow, finally, or do you react?
No, I was like, oh my God, the white people are gonna steal my stuff. There's such a history of black women and women of color having their work erased. and being removed from the ownership and the heart of work that they started. And so I remember when I had the first person that texted me said, "Oh, girl, congratulations. I see Me Too." I was sleeping. It was Sunday morning. I was like, should have been in church. And that's funny because my phone was going up and I was like, I know these people not calling me. Take this Sunday. But I picked up the phone and I had a friend who texted me and she said, "Oh, congrats, I see Me Too everywhere. What did you do?" And I went, and then I immediately went online. That's where we get our breaking news. And I saw, I didn't see it on, I'm not, well now I am, but I wasn't like a Twitter person. Facebook. That's where we dwell. Maybe that's the thing. Is that me?
Okay. It's the linen.
I'm gonna sit right there. And so, so my initial reaction was fear. It really was. I had, so the first was a wave when people were like, hey, either like, what's going on? Did you do this? Or, hey, congratulations, look what you did. But I couldn't find it. And I remember calling my daughter and saying, are you seeing Me Too? What's going on? And she came into the room and I was like, I just handed my computer. I was like, can you find this? She said, I don't see it. But it was on Twitter. And it was trickling over to Facebook. And I didn't know it was Alyssa until the next day, I think it was. I went through a range of emotions. And I have a girlfriend who I love dearly, who also, I met her in Philly, to Dr. Yaba Black. She's an amazing person. My sister, I called her, you know, ladies in the room will know this. You know that thread you have on your phone with all your girlfriends on it? It's your back phone, right? You just go right to it. I went to that, and I was texting my girlfriends, and she called me, and she said, calm down. And she said, this is not how we operate, right? We don't operate out of fear. And she said to me, first of all, you've been doing this forever. Everybody that knows you associates you with this thing. That's why people are calling you, right? So she kind of walked me through it, and then she said, you have over a decade of receipts. Put them out. And so I got calm. I found this video that happened to be like, a lot of this is the grace of God. I found a video on my phone from 2014 of me giving a speech here in Philly and at the March Against Rape Culture. And I uploaded the speech, and I added a little, sort of note to it that said, it's really amazing to see people use this hashtag. These are the reasons why we started it. This is what it means, right? I introduced the concept of empowerment through empathy, which is sort of the crux of our movement. And I was just like, it's just wonderful to see people utilize it. Because it was I had an interesting moment. I want to tell this, if I can. So that's all right. I had a really interesting moment. This was the next day, the night before, right? I was up and I was watching like crazy. My daughter had made my Twitter so you can just watch the hashtag, right? You know what I mean. Set it up like so you can just watch the hashtag. So I was watching it obsessively, and because I kept thinking this is gonna die down, right? And there was a woman, don't know who she was, don't know her race, age, anything, but it was a woman. I'm assuming it was a woman who said hashtag Me Too, and it had a link. So I clicked the link opens up, and it's her story. It's full disclosure, it's her story of being assaulted in college. And it was a heartfelt, obviously, story. And I remember sitting up in bed saying, what are you doing? I said, what are you, and I do this all the time. And I told Mama, what are you doing? Because I had spent the whole day, and I don't want to discount this because I think my fear was not misplaced. But I had spent the whole day quite fearful that my work was going to be lost. And my work that I had poured into and I had been thinking about and been committed to was going to get lost. And in doing that, again, being with my fear, I had missed the fact that my work was happening right in front of me. My work was pouring out over the internet. And in fact, what was happening was I was being called to action, right? Not being told to cower in fear, but I was being literally called to action. And at the moment, I didn't know if I could make a big splash or a little splash, but I knew I had to do something. And so I really felt like I had to make a decision about let me just also back up and say, and I always say thank you to the black ladies in the audience because sisters were ready to ride. Yep. Right? Y'all got to type it all fast. Black women stood up and said, we are not going to allow this to happen. We're not going to let this woman be erased. And to your credit, white women, y'all did it too. The white ladies came right behind. They were like, wait a minute. We've been learning about this intersectionality thing. We got to let it rip. So, but I also feel like because women are so touched by this issue that women, it was a unifier in a lot of ways. And so I felt like I made a decision in that moment. I could have easily been like, all right, we're about to ride. We're going to fight this out. You will not take this from me, right? That could have been a fight. And you would never know me. Nobody wants to hear that. I mean, we could have stood up and I could have got all the people to stand up and say, tell the world this is mine. But in fact, it's not. It's a thing that I gave birth to, but I don't own. Like our children. Right? And so I remember saying, okay, are you going to be in conflict? Or are you going to be in service? This is the call right now. This is like rubber meets the road. You have spent your whole life talking to all those big people, right? Tell everybody, I'm a servant leader. I'm going to live my life in service. You know, it's all good. It's like joining the reserves. So you get called out. And this was the moment I got called out. And so I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that what I was seeing happen on the internet was wild. Yeah, I remember that first week, it was just mass disclosure, which worried me, quite frankly. There was no container to process. It was just people telling their stories, spilling their souls out, just bursting their hearts wide open. And people were not talking about that. They were talking about all around them. And so that moment changed. And we never looked back.
So let me challenge the sort of positive way that you take that. And ask whether or not, maybe you were right in the beginning. Maybe elite white women did steal it from you because you started this with a focus on sort of prompted by the story of a 13-year-old African-American girl who'd been raped. And very quickly, we got to talking about millionaire actresses and elite white women. Not to discount their stories, but certainly the focus changed very quickly. And we've continued a focus on, as you said earlier, sort of the disclosure about prominent men by relatively prominent women, relatively elite women. So do you feel that the fundamental purposes of the movement, as you conceived it, have really been given space to breathe, or have they been subsumed in something else?
Okay, I'm going to answer this in a couple of parts. I keep saying I'm trying to be concise, but y'all see it is what it is. but I really, this question I get it all the time, obviously. So there's a few parts to this. One, I'm going to deal with the elite white men part in a couple of ways. And this is always shocking, even to me, because I never thought in my life I'd be in a position to defend any white woman, particularly rich white women. But what I also know about being a woman in this country is that people will find any reason to blame women. We invent new reasons to blame women. Those elite, rich, famous, whatever white women did not wake up and decide to take something from them. That's number one. Number two, you can't take what's mine. Right? I birthed an idea, and I am steadfast and committed and laser focused on that idea and the work of that idea. But what those women did was stand up and tell their truth. If anybody is at fault for taking something, or not even taking, but misdirecting or redirecting the original purpose of this movement, or even the intended purpose of the tweet, right? We'll get down to it. Because what Alyssa said was, if you have been sexually assaulted or sexually harassed, say me too. She didn't say me too and take down the perpetrator.
Say Me Too. She didn't say that. She said literally, Say Me Too. The media is the culprit. I don't blame a single one of those actresses. I don't blame a single one of those elite white women. I don't blame them. And that surprises people sometimes. But the reason why is, number one, y'all would not be listening to me if not those women had come first. That's just the truth. And I'm okay with that truth, because whatever entry point I have to have this platform now, I appreciate it. And there's nothing that I have said in the last 10 months that I didn't say in the 10 months prior or the 10 years prior to that. I haven't changed my stance. I haven't changed my focus. The focus, what's changed is the world. And so what the media has done is the media has created a narrative about the Me Too movement being overturned, about the Me Too movement being about Hollywood, about all of these different things. But that's not true. And so what makes my job difficult is not the elite women in Hollywood. Matter of fact, they trip over themselves to try to help, right? They don't, I promise you I'm not moving. But they are not the hindrance. The hindrance is one, our country's obsession with fame and celebrity, right? So if what's her name? I can't, whoever. Famous and white. Ashley Judd. If we care about who Ashley Judd or Reese Witherspoon or Gwyneth Paltrow or any one of those, we care about who they date, who they marry, what they wear, what kind of clothes they wear, where they're going, where they vacation. Of course, if there's something salacious and scandalous attached to them, we want to know, people want to know. And the media fed into that. But what happened is, the difference is that happened before Me Too and viral. They stood up and told their stories in September. I think this all gets conflated as well. Me Too wouldn't have had space to happen had they not told their stories first. They told their stories in September in an effort to show the breadth of the problem. Alyssa put this tweet out in October, and then millions of people around the world said, absolutely, this doesn't just happen in Hollywood. This happens to me every day.
Hello. All right. Exactly. Right, and so what I feel like I fight every day in terms of keeping the focus on where we started, and let me just say, I will never not center Black women and girls. That's not to the exclusion of anybody. But that is who I am, that is where I come from, that is what my work is about. But here's the trick about that. It's the beautiful thing. By me centering Black women and girls, what you can ensure is that white women and girls and Asian women and Latinx boys and trans people and queer people and disabled people, they will get what they need. Because if you make sure that the person who has the least amount of service, everybody gets service, right? We know that trickle down doesn't work. So trying to give services or think about the needs of people who have the most is not going to help the people at the bottom. So if I'm going to take a role and call myself a leader in this moment, I have to stay focused and centered on the most marginalized. So I'm okay. Our work is fine, but you won't hear about that work in the mainstream media. And so my pushback against this notion about it being taken and being co-opted is where do we get validation from? Do we need it to be MSNBC and CNN and New York Times cutting all that? Do we have to see ourselves in that before we feel validated? Or not even validated, before we really embrace the idea that this problem is pervasive? They never told our stories anyway. Never. We don't see the stories. We don't see the stories of everyday working class white women who are sexually violated. And we don't see those stories. We could not have a national discourse about sexual violence 10 months ago. When the Cosby thing happened and all of this, all the controversy came out about that, it was all debate. Debate, even after woman, till we got to 60-something, and they still debating, right? this is where we are. Like, I just need us to move past. I need us to do a lot of things, but I'm gonna let you ask the next question.
So I want to talk about coalitions and intersectionality and so on. I'm sure you know that 53% of white women voted for Donald Trump. And he could not have won if he had not gotten a majority of white women. They didn't do so ignorant of his vulgar statements and his pattern of behavior. It's well known, understood, sort of as they say, baked in. They voted for him anyway, because there was clearly a disconnect between that majority of white women and elite white women who favored Hillary overwhelmingly. So how do you bring the majority of white women together with the majority of women of color who have similar experiences in a lot of respects and who face, as you say, a kind of a pervasive atmosphere of sexual violence? How do you make that coalition happen?
I don't know. to be quite honest, we have a private group, Facebook group, a Me Too group, and it's just all for survivors. And we try to be really discerning. People have to answer questions to get in on this. And so we had an issue last week where a woman posted a video of a Democratic candidate somewhere in the Midwest, and it was like a video of him at a debate or at a speech or something. And so another woman in the group who's a conservative said, "Oh, is this allowed? Do we allow this? Because I thought we didn't bring politics here." And she reported the video and complained. So I took it down, to be fair, because it's also not a place for politics. But then that woman, this conservative woman, posted a whole thing about the NRA and how women should be carrying weapons and to protect themselves against sexual violence. So I'm anonymous in the group. I'm not like, I don't use Tarana Burke. I use the Me Too. I'm just write as Me Too. And I tried to have a really unbiased discourse with this person. And I said, this is a heavily debated topic. I don't know what other members think. I didn't put my own opinion in it. And so it started this whole debate on the thread. And one of the things I was trying to say is that part of this got really ugly, by the way, but I was trying to compare it to race, in that if you go to Appalachia or parts of the Midwest or parts of the out west, there are so many poor white communities in the South, right? So many poor white communities who deal with the same economic and political and social conditions that poor Black and other and communities of color deal with. And they have let race divide them and poison their minds in such a way that they will vote against their own interests. Case in point, Donald Trump, right? And so I was trying to make this point that this is, in some ways, a unifier, like I was saying before, because sexual violence doesn't care about your political affiliation. And this woman could not make the leap. She was so, she had and there were other conservatives on the thread, or Republicans, I should say, on the thread, who were trying to reason with her and she just would not make the leap. And so I deleted the thread, because it got ugly. But I remember I was talking to my girlfriends that night, and I was like, this is so sad to me that what we have is a wonderful model, and the work we're doing, the work we're rolling out is a really wonderful model for how we can heal ourselves and our communities, and how we can take these tools, these really basic principles around both organizing and the curation of joy and deep empathy, and how we can heal our communities. And these groups of people are going to self-select them. They're going to select themselves out just because they don't want to affiliate with people because of different political beliefs. Like, we're going to forge ahead. I can try a little bit to make sure everybody's in, and I always say the doors are open for everybody, but I don't know how to do that. And it really is sad, because the numbers don't change by political affiliation at all, not even a little bit. And so, I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know.
So I want to talk about some of the threads of discussion that have gone on, in the mainstream media about the, as you say, sort of the process of capability. Say not the original purpose, not what Milano called for, but it's been a byproduct, right? So one of the criticisms, again, all this will be familiar to you very much so. One of the criticisms is that you have sort of internet outrage mobs that affect people's accused reputation, livelihood.
Why is this on? I'm sorry.
It's okay. And that in this process, this sort of cultural moment, we've really made hash out of some very basic, important American values: the presumption of innocence, due process. And do you think that there are values being sacrificed? If so, do you think it's worth it?
Again, of course, I get this question all the time, and my friend is in the audience. He's an attorney, and we have some of these debates around this and other things. But one, due process is a legal concept, right? Nobody's actually gets due process just because they exist in the world. But that's neither here nor there. We don't have to debate that. I think that what some people fail to understand, again, this is sort of like people think about this in black and white terms and like really polarizing terms. This is an emotional issue as well, right? And I want to believe, and maybe this is naive of me, but I want to believe that we need some time to kind of suss things out. And so, yes, there are definitely false accusations, because of course that's always the topic that comes up. There are definitely some situations where people kind of lump everybody in the same category, right? And one of the things I always say about that is that we have to remember that sexual violence happens on a spectrum, and accountability should happen on a spectrum, right? There's not, and the average person that you talk to will agree with that. The average person that you talk to will say, well, no, the guy who whistles at me on my way to work should not like lose his job and his pension and whatever, but he should definitely have some accountability for that behavior, right? And we need to figure out as a community what that looks like. But the internet mobs and the like vitriol, a lot of that is emotional. And I know this is more than just, it's not women and men, and it's not women against men, but just for a moment thinking about women and being a woman in this country and finally having a moment of freedom, which feels like freedom to a lot of people, to just say, oh my God, can we finally talk about this, the guy who whistles to me every time I'm at work, or the guy at work who leans all the way over and breathes on my neck and looks down my blouse, or the thing that happened to me when I was 7 years old and nobody will ever let me talk about it. So we have this moment where people are just like releasing. This is what I feel. I feel like there's a huge release happening that will level off. And we see it. We also see that there's a lot of pushback against that sort of mob mentality as well. That comes from women as well. It's not just men against women. There are women who say, wait, hold on. Al Franken is a great example. There are a lot of women who say, wait, hold on. Let's take this, let's back up for a second and look at the details. I do a lot of talks with Ronan Farrell, who, you all know Ronan Farrell, right? The journalist. And one of the things that Ronan says, I've adopted saying, and I think is great because he articulates it in a very concise way, is this work is not about believing all survivors or believing all women. And you see that all the time, believe all women. I don't believe that. I do believe we have to listen to all women. And we have to listen to all survivors. And even that is revolutionary, right? It is revolutionary for a woman to have the space to stand up and say, this thing happened to me, and not be shut down immediately, and not be pushed to the shadows, and not be made to be silent. So it is revolutionary for us to say, wait, that happened to you? What do you need? Let's talk about it. How can we remedy the situation? How can we make this different? That in and of itself, the investigation is revolutionary. And I think that that's a place for us to build from. You don't have to believe everybody in order for us to make progress, but you damn sure got to listen to these people when they're standing up and saying what they have to say. So that's I think we will level off. I don't think it'll be, and I don't see as much of that now as we saw like in October, November, earlier in the year. Because people were emotional. They're like, what? We got another one. Get them. It was like, but also, we are also not used to seeing any accountability. Any accountability, right? Like Cosby's another example. Look how long it took. There were 60 women.
Right.
And people still talking about buying NBC. Come on. So the accountability, when Weinstein was arrested, I did all these interviews with people like, do you feel good? Does this feel great? And I'm like, no, this doesn't feel good. This is not about personal vindication. This is about changing systems. I don't care about Weinstein going to jail. I want the whole system that allowed him to do what he did for 25 years to come down.
I want to stick for a minute on Al Franken.
Oh,
there's, I've seen it argued that in a case like Franken, that Me Too was essentially weaponized. That you have Senator Gillibrand, Senator Harris, and others who, potential rivals of Franken for the 2020 Democratic nomination for President of the United States, who jumped to say he needed to leave the Senate and his political life needed to be over, his professional life needed to be over. So I have two questions. One is, do you think that he was sort of railroaded, if you will, as an individual? And then number two, whether or not you think that's the case for him, do you think that there has been at least some of that in this last year?
well, just people weaponize everything, right? Something becomes popular and immediately becomes weaponized in ways that'll affect your opponent or your opposer or what have you. And so I think in the case, more than Gillibrand and the Democrats, some kind of plot to keep him out of political life, I feel like they were responding to the GOP. I feel like it was this moment where, what's his name from Alabama? Moore. There was the case, I'm sorry, Martha's Vineyard, right? I'm sorry. But I feel like there was this need for the Democrats to be righteous and to we have to play fair. And if we're saying it on their side, we have to say it on our side. I feel like that was the impetus more so. And then, the women, and I remember talking to, not Gillibrand, but the other one. Help me out, what's her name? No, from California. What's her name from California? Not Kamala.
Feinstein.
Spears.
Oh, good.
Is she from California? I thought I'm right. Thank you. I remember talking to her. By the way, y'all, that lady has an amazing story. That's just an aside. Her book is coming out. It is amazing. Goodness gracious. I'm sorry. Anyway, I remember talking to her and privately, and I'm not breaching a confidence here, but she was talking about the kind of angst they had about having to make these decisions, because it was also, I'm really terrible with names today. Black from Detroit. Conyers. At least I got my geography right. Because also Conyers was happening around the same time, and she was talking about, she's known him for how many years, and she just really has this belief in him as a good. He did all of this. He had done this work on VAWA, the Violence Against Women Act, and that he was crucial in a lot of ways to support women. And it was hard for her, and so I think that the way that Me Too manifested in politics was really unfortunate, and I think it was weaponized on both sides. I won't say, Al Franken being railroaded, that's really difficult. I don't think, again, on the spectrum of sexual violence, what he did was deeply inappropriate. I think that's not questionable. People can look at the video or whatever and say, and some people might just say, oh, that's just funny, and other people think it's inappropriate. Whatever. I'm not here to debate that part of it, but I think that we lost an opportunity to talk about how accountability can roll out. I think that was a really prime opportunity, just like I think the Aziz Ansari story was a prime. We lost an opportunity there to talk about consent, affirmative consent, about relationships, and about language. Because the other thing that happened in the Aziz Ansari story was that the woman who was the accuser at the end, or I don't know if it was her or was it the writer of the article, but somebody used the word assault. And it changed everything. It changed the whole temperature of the thing, right? Because now you're talking about a crime. And so I thought more so than, I really want us to move away from, this is hard for people to hear sometimes, I think. Maybe not away from, but I want us to expand a little bit beyond guilt and innocence. And we need to talk more about harm and harm reduction, right? Because a lot of these things are in the gray area. Actually, most things around sexual violence that are happening on a regular basis there's gray areas, and it's not black and white. But we need to have the ability to have nuanced conversations and detailed conversations. Some of these things take time. You can't solve it in a soundbite. You can't just do a TV appearance, have a little debate on MSNBC, and that's the end of it. We need, as a culture and as a community, we need to dig into these issues. And I think those stories were missed opportunities to do something.
So some of the things that you've talked about touch on this idea of the spectrum and sort of things being lumped together. So I want to go back to pretty early after the viral moment, and the quote from Matt Damon. That again, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so Matt Damon does an interview, and he says, this is a quote: "There's a difference between patting someone on the butt and rape or child molestation. Both of these behaviors need to be confronted and eradicated without question, but they shouldn't be conflated." End quote. So he was told to shut up. I mean, literally.
That was interesting. I'm not going to talk about this now. Some time has passed. But I was seriously, I was quiet around the Matt Damon thing, and mostly because I was I thought I missed something. I did. I thought I missed that he must have said or done something else. And I think what I did a little bit of research, I think is because of the close proximity, his relationship to Ben Affleck and Casey Affleck. That in the moment, I think it was also timing, that the moment that he came forward and started talking about that was like a sort of tenuous moment. But he essentially said what I say all the time. He said, right? I do believe that that it happens on the spectrum, and we have to be able to talk about it in that way. Because it is dangerous if we don't, and it's a disservice to the survivor if we don't. Right? It's a disservice if I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse and you want to stand and give a equal platform, and that's not to discredit or to diminish the pain that comes from being harassed at work or from being catcalled and all the rest of that. It's a different kind of pain, right? And it's a different kind of trauma that it leaves you with. And so I think it's more respectful to survivors to give everything their own conversation and their own moment. And so I didn't quite understand why people, and maybe it's because he thought, like, women were like, we're not dumb. We know that, right? We don't need you, Matt Damon, to tell us that we have to have nuanced conversations. We know, right? I think it was more so kind of the way it came off and the timing, and not so much what he said, but it was like, yeah. And again, I get annoyed at the fact that there's this general belief that women in particular can't distinguish. And it was happening right now in the Me Too movement is, you're blaming everybody, and oh my God, I can't tell you have a nice dress. And I'm like, stop it, just stop it. It's just ridiculous. It's like the men who are like, well, you know, like, what's your man name, the tall one, Tony Robbins. But it's like, well, I have a friend who was gonna hire a beautiful woman, but he didn't because of the Me Too movement. Or the guy who plays Superman who's like, well, I don't know if I can't talk to her. God, what can I do? I can't say anything because she might say I tried to rape her. Cut it out. Like, that's insulting. That's deeply insulting. Because again, I'm gonna talk about men and women for not for I guess more in a second, but just speaking of men and women, as a woman, it's so discrediting. If I'm standing up and saying, hey, think about this. You're at work, or many of you have probably had these conversations. Your guy friends, you know, you're kind of hanging around, and the guy's like, so is it that bad, right? Have y'all had those conversations? Is it really that bad? Is it, what's going on? Or like, and sometimes I want to be like, are you serious? Like, this is such a disconnect in how it works, right? Like, when I get up and I get dressed in the morning, I have to think from the moment I start putting on makeup and clothes and picking out my outfit, I have to think about, where am I going today? Should I wear that? Oh, let me not wear that because that's where that construction site is. Or last time I was at this place, we have to be strategic in how we dress and how we move and where we go and who we talk to and how we talk to them and how we present. That is frustrating. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. Period.
Okay, so if you were the leader of the world, you could do whatever. Rape is a crime. Sexual harassment is a legal category that people have rights under. What would you change if there are matters of public policy? So let me ask you top three. What things should bring the system down?
If I was the leader and I could make the decision, the first thing I would change is our education system. I would institute comprehensive sex education and start in pre-K. And I think part of the problem is that everything other than that I can name is a Band-Aid. We are not going to have this culture shift that people think is happening, because it's happening, but it hasn't happened. We're not going to have a culture shift. We're not going to change our society. We're not going to think differently about sexual violence and respect and boundaries and the way we interact until we change the way we educate our children and we unlearn. This is, at the end of the day, this is a question about humanity. We can get into men and women relationships and queer and this, and we can do all, but this is about fundamentally how people respect and interact with people on a human level. So, comprehensive sex education would be my first mandate, because I think about the future. I feel like we are going to be handmaids in a while, so. I'm sorry, that's a bad joke. I'm so sorry. I just finished binge watching season 2, so it is heavily in my mind. But but I think about what would our world look like if we started today, and we started in pre-K. If you can teach kids not to run with scissors, to say please, then you can teach them about boundaries. You can teach them about respect. You can teach them about humanity. And so if we start at a very early age with very simple concepts, right? And we layer on every year, not just in, what is it now, 5th grade, 10th grade, like whatever the random ages they pick, but every single year. And we talk about trans people are human beings. And a person is who they say they are. And you have body autonomy, and you have a right to that. And we start introducing those concepts. What we do now, we give them random tips and things through middle school and high school. And then we graduate these kids from high school and send them to college, and they go in a room and they get on a computer and they take a test, or they go through a workshop, or somebody stands in an auditorium of 1,000 kids and tells them about the rules of being on a college campus, and we wonder why the rate of sexual assault is what it is on college campuses. You can't start teaching that in the 12th grade. You can't expect to shift the way somebody interacts with other human beings when they go to college. So if I could change the rules, it would certainly start with that. And I don't know, I'd make up some other rules, but I'd start with education.
Okay, we're going to open.
Are we winding down?
Yeah, we're going to open to questions from all of you. There's a microphone that's going to be passed around. There it comes. It's coming.
This is the part where we tell people it's just questions and not soliloquies.
Exactly. Okay, who's got the first one? Somebody. Here we go.
I'm also going to be bad with names today, but there was an article in the New York Times this morning or the past couple days about a student, male student, who was allegedly assaulted and harassed by his professor, a woman, and that major feminist leaders are writing in support of her. And I just wondered what your thoughts are on that and where that puts us when, like, women are saying, oh, well, a woman can't do this. Like,
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. This is without reading the story, without just the facts that I know. It's ridiculous. And this is why a lot of men respond in the way they do. Every day I get men asking me, is this movement for us? Are men, do you acknowledge that men are survivors? And so this is the thing. If we could stop talking about male, female, talking about gender for a minute and talk about power and privilege, I think that one of the worst, maybe that would be one of my laws, I don't know. but one of the worst things to happen in terms of the narrative being turned on its head is that we have made this a conversation about sex and sexuality and gender, when it is at every turn it's about power and privilege. And a professor harassing a child, a student, is absolutely the epitome of an example of a misuse of power. So I don't agree with that at all. Oh, I was kind of dead silent.
Good evening.
Hi.
Good evening. My name is Asantwa Nkrumah, and I live in Organized here in Philadelphia.
Yes, Asantwa.
How are you?
How are you?
Two quick questions. My first question is, have the organizations such as the NAACP, National Urban League, or the Congressional Black Caucus reached out to you to support you with resources or what have you? That's one question. My second question is, for someone who's worked in this field off and on for about 18 years, and when it came out a few days ago about Congressman Keith Ellison and domestic violence.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. My concern now with that is public fatigue, because I've been saying to some of my friends, well, the shoe keeps dropping and dropping and dropping, even with quote-unquote good guys. So thank you very much.
So, what's your first? Oh, so the old school black institutions, yeah. No, not with resources. No, absolutely not. And if I can pull the curtain for a second and we can have a community conversation. I don't expect them to. And what they've done now they give me all kind of awards. Child, they got awards, they got luncheons and receptions, and they'll give me an award in a minute. No, but I'm gonna tell you what. If they don't have to give me a dime. If they changed the mandate of what they do and said that we are taking on sexual violence in the black community as a national issue, because the resource I need is human resources. I need money too. Don't take that. Y'all can donate. But really, I need those legacy institutions. And I spoke at the Urban League two weeks ago, a week ago, something like that, and I said the same thing. I'm like, y'all have national chapters, you have access to people across the country, and our community, like really communities of color, are like, this is the same issue in other communities of color, but we are, it's really fascinating what happens, and what's happening with me in particular in the black community, is that there is a cognitive dissonance, that's right? They are, again, lots of awards and accolades and all of this kind of stuff. But when we get to the issue, I was at the National Action Network Gala. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. But I was at the National Action Network Gala, and I was like, y'all, this is beautiful. Beautiful award. Love Crystal, Tiffany Fox. It was beautiful. But if y'all are only going to celebrate me and not interrogate the reasons why you know me, I don't need to be here. Right? So, if you all are part of legacy institutions in this room, NAACP, Urban League, sororities, fraternities,
National Council of Negro Women,
all of them, NCNW, whoever, run the list. SNCC, not SNCC, I'm playing. But whatever, if you're in legacy institutions, I beg of you to bring this issue to your local chapter and then ask your local chapter to bring it to the national chapter. This is not something that has to be led by me. It has to actually be led by you. These institutions have to hear that the people who they say they're servicing are saying, this affects me too. This is affecting our community, and if we have any reach and any power and any resources, we need to pour it into this issue. And they have the power to do that. So y'all go to these organizations and say, yes, we want to deal with police brutality. Yes, we want to deal with racial injustice. Yes, we want to deal with politics. And yes, We have to deal with the election. But let me tell you what, this affects the election too. Because this is my new thing. Somebody might ask about this, but this is my new thing is that what if we, and I'm saying we as the survivors, what if we were thought of as a constituency, right? Because what happens now is that we are thought of as people think of survivors, and they think of survivors of sexual violence, it's all this pity. What are we gonna do? That's why they only wanna offer us services. And the services are needed. We need more services, we need people to be helped, whatever, but they stop at services. When in actuality, look around at the numbers, 12 million people posted Me Too on just Facebook in the first 24 hours. That's a power base. So imagine if we started voting along the lines as a survivor. Not a black woman or a white woman or a Democrat or a Republican, but as a survivor of sexual violence who will not vote for a person who has policies in place that make my community more vulnerable.
That raised two things I want to follow up on real quick. So one is about the money, right? Because you do need money to be able to do your work.
We need money.
Is all the money going to Time's Up and those rich ladies?
You're going to make me talk about these white women, ain't you?
That's one question. The second question is about about what you were saying on making this into sort of a political force. Okay?
Yeah.
And then it goes back to the question we talked about earlier of how do you get people, women who are predominantly the survivors, to think across their other differences. Right?
So on the money and Time's Up, we are. What happened in January? So Time's Up launched, obviously people know this, January at the Golden Globes and whatnot. I actually didn't know what that was happening, but that's another story. There has been a conflation, if I'm being perfectly honest. Time's Up raised $31 million in 3 weeks. And yeah, when they came out in January. That time period, or particularly early on in this, when I was sort of just like, I'll go wherever and talk about whatever. You know, I might have made some different decisions now because there's a lot of conflation still with Me Too and Time's Up. Mm-hmm. And we actually are doing very different things, have very different agendas, support each other. They're very supportive. They're not giving no coins, but they're very supportive. But I think there's a popular misconception that we have money because all of that money came in. And in actuality, they don't even have that money. That $31 million went into the Legal Defense Fund. And they now have an initiative where they're raising $100 million to do all kind of work about like women in the workforce and all of that. We are raising $25 million right now. And the $25 million is, there's a Me Too fund. And we're doing it in partnership with the New York Women's Foundation. Even though it's national, but it's housed at the New York Women's Foundation. And our fund we're raising $25 million over 5 years because what I really want to do in this moment is while I have this spotlight, while I have this moment of people paying attention, is we need to widen the field. So the $25 million is $5 million a year for the next 5 years to support our work, but also we are granting large grants to organizations who are doing this work in the field. For people like me, who are unknown, who are just had their head down doing their work for however many years, who don't have resources. And so what we are about to grant $500,000 in October. Our first round of grants will happen in October, but we are like raising and giving it out, you know? So we are certainly very much trying to raise money and trying to get that out that we are not Time's Up. We don't have $30 million. I keep talking about 25 million. We got $1 million so far. But, you know, I got $1 million, cut it in half, give it, like, we're just trying to get it out the door because I also don't want the Me Too movement to take up all the oxygen in the room. Right, and y'all know that'll happen. People will be like, oh, where do we write a check? Let's send it to Me Too. And then we just become the purveyor of all things sexual violence, and that's not good. I want all the ideas. I want all the people. I want as many people at the table thinking about this issue and trying to figure out how to solve this issue as possible. So, you know, I feel like, who's the man who robbed Robin Hood? I'm just like, you know, everybody's paying attention to me. Sure, give me the money so I can kind of give it out over here. But that's what's happening. So we're raising this money to put into this fund so we can get it out to people so they can, because what's happening, people don't realize, I guess people don't think about this, people who do this work have been inundated. And there's no more resources. There's not, more money hasn't gone into the field since last October. But more survivors have come forward. So these organizations and these groups and these churches and these community groups who support survivors or people who are working to end sexual violence have so much more work to do and so much more attention on them, but they don't have more money. So we are trying to get that money to them.
Let me just pick up on one more thread real quickly about legacy Black organizations.
Be careful.
Isn't there an argument to be made that there's a reluctance to focus on this issue because of the long history of Black men being falsely accused?
I'm so glad you brought that up. You are good. Here's what I have to say about that. I want my folks, I want all people, but I want my folks in particular. This goes back to that idea of us being able to have nuanced conversations. I want us to be able to have a nuanced conversation about that. And how I describe that is that we have to be able to hold two truths or more than one truth at the same time, right? It is absolutely true that the history of Black men being falsely accused in this country, mainly at the hands of white women, is undisputable. From Emmett Till to the Central Park Five, we've seen it over and over and over again. Well, not the Central Park Five, that wasn't falsely accused, but still, they were accused in the public. But what's also true is that in every community, there's no special depravity in the Black community. In every community, Asian, Latinx, Southeast Asian, white, whatever, every community, in all crimes, the crimes are happening intraracially, right? White men rape white women, Asian men rape Asian women, Black men rape Black women. That's just true. And so we have to be able to hold the idea that this history is true. Bill Cosby's not Emmett Till. R. Kelly's not one of the Central Park Five. And so we have to, these legacy organizations need to be the ones saying, while we have this history, we cannot let this unfortunate and tragic history stop us from doing something about the reality that sexual violence, let me tell you a statistic. You done got me warmed up now. It's my fault. We all have heard the statistic that 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will experience sexual violence by the time they're 18. Have people heard that before? Let me tell you one you haven't heard. You might have heard it because I told Viola Davis and she told everybody, but anyway. She said at the Women's March, I was like, I told her that. But what's also true is that a Black woman who is sexually assaulted by the time she's 18 is 66% more likely to be sexually assaulted as an adult. That means that we have millions of Black women walking around this country with multiple instances of sexual violence that have happened largely at the hands of Black men. Those numbers are not disputable. You can do them, you can take the data and go to wherever you get data from in research, or you can go to your family reunion and get anecdotal data from your cousins and your aunties and your grandmas and your uncles and your little boy cousins and all the rest of them. It's pervasive. And so we get stuck, we hide behind that history. Like we can't hold two things to be true at the same time. And it's killing us. And so I submit that you go back to those legacy organizations and you tell them, I don't want to hear about that. I know about that. I'm clear about that. And when there's instances of Black men, because they're still falsely accused, we can deal with that. But we can do both and. We can, that's why it's good to investigate every instance, right? Because upon investigation, if there's a case right now, and it hasn't gotten a bunch of media attention, but I had a prominent person call me about it. A young Black man was falsely accused by a white woman somewhere in Florida. I want to get that Bugs Bunny sauce so bad sometimes. But he was falsely accused, and the woman had actually falsely accused another Black man at another point, and she's in jail now, and it's a you know, and they didn't want to come forward and make it into a media story because they didn't want it to detract from the movement and from this thing. And I thought, that's great. I'm glad that y'all thought of that. That is a real situation. There was real harm done. That Black man almost lost his life or lost his livelihood. That's a real thing. And these other things are real. And so that's not an excuse. It just can't be an excuse anymore. And we have been, black women especially, have been quieted and silenced by that for decades. For decades. And we suffer in silence because we don't want to bring down a black man. We suffer in silence because we don't want to ruin our, stop what's happening in our communities. And it's more important. It's like, say her name. Like, black women don't get killed by police. Let me give you another statistic. I'm going to stop. But sexual assault is the second most. Police brutality is the first, the highest, what do you call it? Reported, whatever, against police, and sexual assault is the second. The second. But we got to stop at one. We got to stop these black men from being killed. Black women get killed and we get raped. Somebody has to hold that. You want to know why I would never take my focus over black women and girls? That's why.
Okay, we have one in the back, then we'll come to you. Okay.
Hi. Okay. So my question actually is somewhat related to that. I'm curious if you have, I'm back here, examples and/or dreams about what it looks like to be accountable outside of a punitive system.
I love when the smart people come. Let me tell you something. We meaning the community of people who are existing, who do with this work, talk about this all the time. There is a huge movement that I support vigorously in this country around restore. I'm sorry I keep doing this. I shouldn't have made my hair like this. I'm not. I'm just sorry. But there's a huge movement towards restorative and transformative justice, which I support. But I had a moment that I had to get really honest with myself, because I was at a thing talking, speaking, and I made a statement about how many, I implored the audience to think about how many of us, when people go to drug rehab and they come home and they tell them, you shouldn't go back into the community where you were using because you're more susceptible, blah, blah, blah. And I said to the audience, how many of us have to live and work and worship and exist in the spaces where we were harmed, right? And not only do we have to do that, we have to actively watch people not care. We have to actively watch people not do anything about it, not do anything to change the community, and relegate our pain to secondary, if that. And this woman came up to me after, and she said, I appreciate what you said. She said, what about if you have to not only live and, do all those things in the same community, what if you have to do it with your perpetrator? And how do I handle that? And I mean, that's a serious thing, obviously, to think about. And I thought to myself, she was asking me about all these things I said about transformative justice and restorative justice. And I thought to myself later, I called my girlfriend who does this work. She does it with perpetrators in California. And I said, I realized that I was speaking the language of it, right? Like intellectually, I can run down all kind of reasons and whatnot about why we should have a system that's less punitive. In fact, there's research that shows that survivors of sexual violence actually think less punitively. And I can run all of that down for you, but I didn't know if it was in my heart, right? I didn't know that if my heart had actually caught up to that. And I was in public conversation with this other woman in Detroit, Marion Kaba, if you don't know who that is. And I said, she asked me that question, and I said, I believe my responsibility right now, in this moment, with this level of visibility, is to help survivors of sexual violence feel more safe and more protected, and to make communities and people who are more vulnerable to sexual violence feel less vulnerable, while we dream about what a world looks like that we can employ transformative and restorative justice. We're not in that world in this moment necessarily. We can start though, and that doesn't mean we put it on the hook and keep looking at it like a picture that we want, like, we on a vision board. We have to, where we have spaces that we can employ those things. Chicago is a perfect example. the Black Youth Project 100's organization, national organization, they had an issue in Chicago around sexual violence, and they really sat down and they developed this model for transformative justice within their circle. So I think when we have opportunities to do that in community with people who are ready to do that work, right? That's what I was saying earlier, it's not quick work. Who are really committed to and ready to dive into that work, we should absolutely do it. But we can't fault people who are not there yet. And we can't hold people who are, you know, there's also a debate about the rape kits. There's people who are like, we gotta test more rape kits, we gotta get these rape kits tested. And then there are people who actually counter that and say, testing more rape kits just means that more people get arrested. Who am I to tell this woman whose rape kit was tested 3 years ago and has been sitting in a box in a police station for all these years that she should not have that kit tested because somebody might go to jail? Who am I to do that, right? If this is really survivor-led and survivor-centered, then I have to start with where the survivors are. So I grapple with it. I struggle with that question. I'm still trying to think of, and this is my answer, I guess, I'm thinking of like where I land. I'm still trying to see where my heart lands. Intellectually, I'm there. My heart, as a survivor, I have to be honest. What would I do if I had a chance to hold this person accountable? I don't know.
Okay, we're going to run a little bit longer, maybe two more. This young lady in the front.
Yeah, two up here and one there.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I'm a college student. So my question is, so earlier on, you talked about, you know, finding and using your own voice, and I was wondering what advice you would give to young women who want to become organizers and are still struggling to find their voice.
Baby, listen. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say baby. I get
okay.
That way, because I'm old. Don't mind. I think that we have, one of the most, well, something that's unfortunate to me is that we have created this hierarchy with young people that you do this, you do that, you do this, and then you graduate or you, whatever happens, you have to go through these things and you find your voice one day. That's not true. One of the things I try to tell young people all the time is what I said when I first got on the stage, that you have that power now. I think that the mix of the way we are consumed with media and consumed with the fact that we can create our own media now has skewed things in a way that young people think that their voice doesn't count unless everybody can hear it, right? Unless it's viral or it's somehow validated by like thousands of likes or what have you. None of that is true. Your voice will speak to you. Someday, I remember when I made the decision that I was going to just do this work. I was an organizer down south, and we organized around everything. Any injustice that happened, we were up and ready. And I still support obviously a lot of different issues. But somewhere in my 20s, I made a decision and said, this is just what I want to do. This is what I'm passionate about. This is what moves me. And you can try different things. It's fine, but one day your voice is going to speak to you. You don't have to find your voice. You just have to amplify it, right? I really hate when you say, this is a moment where women are finding their voices. That's bullshit. We have voices. Women? Folks just don't listen, right? We found a frequency that people can hear us on, but you have a voice. And it'll get louder when it's supposed to, and it'll get louder and louder, and the thing that you're passionate about is gonna make it fall up out your mouth, and just follow it. It's there, follow it. Don't try to dig and find it, it's there. It will lead you, okay?
I'm originally from the South. I've been here for a couple of months.
Where are you from?
Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay.
And so that's important for my question because, of course, you know, Bible Belt and just being Black, period, religion is a big deal. And I love the way that you've been answering a lot of questions, kind of talking about the evolution of your thoughts and how our thoughts can change when we are, and sometimes we're like, I don't know, I'm still thinking about that. But where are you at, I guess, on the intersection with religion? Particularly, there's a lot of movements you mentioned comprehensive sex education, and there's some groups in Memphis that are working on that, but they can't seem to break past the religious part that if we tell people about this, then all the kids are gonna start having sex. So it's a huge barrier, and then even this week in Pennsylvania, they released the name of 300 you preventing education, but then you're sometimes the perpetrator. So kind of where do you feel that plays into your utopian society that we're trying to get to?
We're still building. Well, I mean, for me, religion, or rather my faith, is a huge part of my life. I'm really open and transparent about that. Actually, that's not true. I'm probably not as transparent as I should be about that. Because, if I'm being honest, because there's a part of also the founding of me too that is deeply spiritual. That was literally me feeling like God was like, I'm talking to you. I was like, ah! But in a really sort of concrete way, I'm here in Philadelphia. The reason why Me Too grew in Philadelphia was because I was a member of Enon Tabernacle Baptist Church, where Pastor Waller is the senior pastor. And Pastor Waller allowed, anybody remember Enon? I know there's members of Enon in this room. Somebody go to Enon. Oh, there you go. There's always at least one. There's 10,000 of us. You see, I still say us, and I got a whole new church home. I'm sorry, Parkchester Baptist. But what he did was he allowed us to create a sexual assault survivors ministry in the church. And that was, again, revolutionary. And so where I am is I think that the church, the black church in particular, but churches in general, and religious institutions in general can play such a vital role in this. And as we are able to get to those leaders and that leadership, and I feel like if we can create space, and I remember having these meetings with Pastor Waller, and he, would listen and would really try to connect more so as his congregants. This was a thing, this is why I said go to the legacy institutions, because it was the congregants saying, this is a pain, this is a collective trauma that we recognize in this congregation that we have the power to do something about. Help us. And based on that, he was like, what can I do? And we got the space and we got the time, whatever. So I feel like a real big key is of some of these religious institutions coming to terms with the reality that this is in your church. It's in your mosque. It's in your synagogue. It's everywhere. It's in your, I forgot what they call it. The what happened?
Temple.
There too. So I do believe religion can play, but I also recognize I live in Alabama. So yeah. So I recognize the difficulties of the Bible Belt. And sometimes it also takes a revolution inside the church that's not about the leadership. Right? It is about the people standing up and saying, this is the reality. And whether you want to face it or not, it's still going to be here. And so again, this is what organizing is. This is how movements build. When people decide, they make a decision and decide to push back collectively. Your leadership in your church is either going to have to listen or you're going to have to make a choice to move. Right? That's a hard choice for a lot of people. But it really is about where we're going to stand. Some of us got to figure out where we're going to stand. This is not about a hashtag. Right? This is about literally our lives and our livelihoods and our humanity, and we have to figure out where we're going to stand. And if I have to stand outside the church, yelling inside the church, I'll do that. If I gotta get the people as they come out of the church and say, I know that this is affecting you, come with me, I'll do that. But we gotta be bold. Now I'm not gonna start preaching, but y'all know we don't need a pastor to worship the, okay.
I know there are a lot of questions that.
There was one lady right there. Just let me get that one
Okay,
last
that's
lady.
one. That's one.
We have
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry. Did I start a mess?
Two.
You want to scaffold them?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take two. We'll take two, there'll be one answer, and then we're gonna wrap. Okay.
Okay, so I was having a conversation over back, you're right.
Okay.
I was having a conversation with my mom a couple months ago, and we were talking about sexual violence and how people view their sexual morality as separate from a person's actual, whole morality. And I wanted to know, so my example would be, this person cheated on their wife, but they're really a good person. That's the only bad thing that they'll ever do ever. They don't, nothing. Or someone is eligible for redemption, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, for whistling swing at a woman down the street or committing some type of sexual assault.
Yeah.
But murder, doing drugs, selling drugs, there's like these other things, they don't get that kind of social redemption and forgiveness. So I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that, and if there are ways to start to bring that conversation more into the fold.
Oh, first of all, we got to answer next one. Sorry.
Take one more and then.
There's somebody down here in the middle. Okay. Are you wearing a classic Me Too shirt?
I am.
Who is that?
You
You go to my church?
No, but we met at March Every Culture.
Oh, look at that. Like, oh, I'm so excited. I love them shirts. Sorry. Go ahead.
So my question is just, how do you curate your joy now today while you're doing all of this work?
Bless your heart. Okay. So that's a great question. I'm gonna start with you back there. One, I'm glad you're having that conversation with your parents. Number one. Number two, I think this is a really important part of narrative shift. And this is why I want y'all to walk out of here today knowing that you own a part of this movement, and that and the part that you own, however you want to own it, can be shaped by how you talk about it. And so this idea is part of the reason why we do that, part of the reason why we separate that kind of morality is because people still don't understand the, I keep talking about like sort of the breadth of sexual violence. If people understood that when you take, that it's a way to diminish your humanity, and so in some ways it is a death. If people could understand and relate to the part of you that dies inside when your body is violated, then they can equate it to murder and these other crimes that they think of as more. And that happens as we tell our stories and we tell the truth. And I'm not really, surprisingly, I'm not a proponent of like just tell your story to everybody, because I don't think that's healing. I don't think that's healing. I think that we are in a moment where we have to be really careful about trauma porn. People are like encouraging folks to tell their stories every day, and I'm like, here's the thing you don't realize, that Me Too is about your giving you autonomy, and so people get to decide, I can just say Me Too, or I can say Me Too and tell my story. So I do think that the telling of our stories and people telling the truth, not even about the details of what happened to you, but about the trauma you hold after that. That's why I always say that this movement is really about what happens after you say Me Too. I think the more people understand that, the more that those things will start to equate, and they realize that that violation is equivalent to so many other things that they place more value on. Because again, it's about diminishing somebody's humanity, and you can't live a real full life, and this gets to your question, sis, with a diminished humanity. And so shifting to your question about joy, I was living a half a life because I thought that the way that my humanity had been diminished was the extent of who I was, right? And I'm a Virgo, if that means anything. Hey. These Leos about to be out of here. But in my Virgo mind, I'm gonna tell this little quick story. This is how we're gonna end it. My Virgo mind, when I was a young person, thought after the Maya Angelou thing and after the like, okay, wait, there's a way for me to like really feel joy, or to really be whole and not fake it, because I was good at the faking part. I was a straight A student and a track star and a this and a that, and all the things to make sure nobody really saw that I was fast. Or imagine being a 6-year-old imagine, I used to say out loud, I lost my virginity at 6. Wow. Imagine that. Imagine holding that. And thinking, I can't even contribute to these conversations that as teenagers, everybody's talking about the little sexual things, and I was always quiet, and they thought I was quiet because I was virginal, and I thought I was being quiet because y'all don't really know who I am. You don't really understand the dirt that I'm holding. And so my Virgo mind thought, I'm gonna do this like a science experiment. It's so dumb, but it's just, again, young minds. And I remember when I was pregnant, I thought, okay, remember when everybody was reading The Secret? Y'all might be a little young for that. But remember everybody was like on The Secret or Iyanla and Deepak Chopra, they were all popular. Everybody had a self-help book for something. And they were great. I think those things were helpful to me too. But I remember thinking, this doesn't really work for me. Right? Iyanla would be like, write the affirmation down, look in the mirror and keep saying it, and I'd be like, you're beautiful, and I'd say, this, I don't believe this. You know, I would try it every day, and I'm like, you're worthy, and I'd just be like, you lying. Right? And so I thought, I have to go at this a little more scientific. And so what I started doing was, I kept a journal. And y'all, don't ask me to buy this journal when you just get a book. We love to commodify things. I'll tell the story and people be like after, do you sell joy journals? No, get a notebook and a pen. I got a notebook and a pen. And I started writing down, literally documenting every time I felt joy. It was the oddest thing. I did it for several years, but I did it first when my daughter was young. And it would be stuff like, oh, I love this journal when I go back and look at it. It's like, I picked the baby up from the daycare today and she ran and jumped in my arms, you know? Or my daughter used to have this little dance we would do and she was adorable, and it would be stuff like that. And I was like, huh, that made me feel good. And I really tried to dissect what joy looked like if there was really joy in my life. Put the book down. A couple of years passed, I moved and I was unpacking and I found it. And I'm reading through it and I'm just like, I literally, not to be Oprah, but I did have like an aha moment. And that moment was, I had bought all the books, all the self-help, all of the this, and I had done all the mantras, and I had done all of this stuff. And what I interpreted those books were telling me is that you gotta find joy out in the world. You gotta go out and like get a hobby or do this activity or keep telling yourself this thing. All of those things made me feel like I had to search outside of myself. What this little $2.99 dollar store, whatever book told me was that there's joy all around me. I literally create it. But the world teaches you, and the shame of sexual violence teaches you that you don't deserve that. That those things aren't real. That it's just and so how I thought about it was like, yeah, there's pops of joy in my life, but really, I'm this. I'm not this, I'm really this. And so the trauma, I was led by the trauma. And that thing changed me. I was like, wait a minute. I don't have to go find joy. It's literally around. And people don't want to hear the kind of joy, because my joy might be eating a pound cake watching a Law & Order marathon. I am quite happy in those moments. And you know, we're all in this like self-care moment, but what I do now is the same thing. I need to spend time with my friends. I need to have time with my baby girl, my daughter, and my most joyous moments are spent with my child. I love her. She just is funny and exciting, and it brings me joy. It brings me joy to laugh from my belly with my girlfriends. It brings me joy to eat pound cake and watch Law & Order. I mean, it don't bring me joy to my thighs, but it's okay. And so what I try to do in these moments, because it is stressful, and I don't want to pretend that this is not a hard moment. This has been a hard year, and this is hard work. But I am clear because I have empirical data that tells me that it's not always this, that I don't have to live here, that I know that that I live a life that generates joy. And that when those moments come, because I still have moments where I cannot get out of bed. I still have moments. There was a case, I don't even want to talk about it. It was a case earlier this year that really knocked me on my ass. Like, I just was like, I can't take it. There's so much hatred in the world. I still have those moments. I still get triggered, more so now. I've been dealing with this for most of my life and been fine, and this movement has unearthed all kind of stuff. But I have evidence now that that's not my life. It's not the totality of my life. And so when those moments come, I literally lean into that. I got a girlfriend, same one, y'all, but that I was telling you about earlier. I got a girlfriend now, when I start feeling sorry for myself, and I call and I'm like, oh girl, I'm fat, I done gained 20 pounds, and I gotta do this, and whatever the thing is, she starts every conversation, she says, okay, who do you need me to be? And we make a decision together, and I'm like, I just need you to let me be miserable. And she's like, okay, you got about an hour to be miserable. Right? But that accountability and that mirror is so helpful, and I would not have gotten through this year if not for it. And so that's what keeps me sane, because I actually know the truth now. once that truth was revealed, that I can generate my own joy, and that you can't define me by this trauma, can't tell me nothing.
Oh, yeah.